Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome as you start coming on in. I'm Nick Perro here, founder of Sick of the Shit Publications, joined by some very wonderful and amazing folks. Welcome to Listening Louder. This is a special episode with me and Naida Green in conjunction with each other and the Disability Community for Democracy, Nothing About Us Without Us. And we're joined by our good friend, Dr. Eric Lulov today, medical editor at Blue Amp Media, friend of Sick of the Shit Publications. You've seen him on Diogenes Club, on all sorts of things. Good morning, everyone, as you come on in. We've got a really important conversation today about the recent DOJ Olmstead memo so that they can begin the steps to dismantle freedoms and rights for the disabled community, people with disabilities, and all of those around us. Naida, Eric, it's good to see both of you. Naida, how are you this morning before we let Eric speak?
Better than I was. So if those who saw the live stream on Saturday, I just went off. Um, I went off. And the reason why I went off is because I literally fought for integration, especially in the mental health world over 20 years ago. I'm a trained peer advocate via New York State. I no longer work in the mental health side, but I'm a trained peer advocate. I know what the state inpatient and outpatient facilities are like, and they're not great. And they want to come out with this memo to shove people back into these horrible places. And I am also old enough to remember when Willowbrook in Staten Island was closed, because I am from the New York tri-state area. I grew up in Westchester County, which is just north of the Bronx. So I remember that freaking horror show. So I am better today. I'm excited that we're doing this. Just to let everybody know, this was not the plan. We were supposed to have like a cool episode, but of course, this administration, this current occupant and his co-conspirators have no dignity and no common sense. So we had to put on an emergency episode. So that's where
Yeah. So good morning, Naida. Thank you. And just so everybody knows, this is going to be a new series that Naida and I are working to develop. This is going to be a regular occurrence in a little while. We're still working on developing it. We're still working on getting everything together, ensuring that we have a really good focus, because we want to make sure that we're making an impact right away and that we're doing something that is actionable for all of you, but also bring stories and community together. This is about bridging gaps. This is about increasing our understanding with each other and learning. And there's a reason I called it Listening Louder, is because it's a phrase I like to use at home, where you listen louder and hear more. And that's what we really need to be doing right now. And so we're going to be giving a lot of context today. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the Olmstead v. LC decision from 1999. And for friends on Substack, it's a little glitchy this morning. So please bear with Substack as they do their whatever they do for glitchiness. We're also streaming this for the first time on Kick. We're streaming on YouTube and Twitch. So if you're with us, please hit the like or the subscribe button wherever you're at to join these discussions, because they're going to be really important. And this one is really important too. Naida, you hit me up this weekend about, and we're going to introduce Eric here in a sec. Don't worry, everyone. He is going to be getting to talk with us, but we just wanted to do a quick.
I'm the silent hand puppet right now.
He's our Muppet below. And so today is going to be doing our discussion into the Olmstead decision, what's going on, the new DOJ memo that was put out on Thursday evening, right before Juneteenth, and hidden in all of the other news to try and get it through without anybody noticing. But we did. We noticed. We saw it, and we're not going to be silent about it. I put an article out yesterday where I was pissed too. Like, I don't know if I just wrote it from the heart, and it's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit what's going on. We need to stop relitigating basic human rights and freedoms. They're there. They're deserved. They are unalienable rights for freedom and dignity and self-determination. The American idea of self-determination. They want to take that away from the disability community, which will then impact others. It will impact all of you. And so we wanted to talk about it. And we've got a video that I'm going to put up here, and we'll break it down and stop. It's a short 3-minute video, but we're going to break it apart into segments so that we don't get a YouTube content violation or anything like that. And then we're going to discuss what the DOJ put out for the Olmstead memo. And Dr. Eric is with us to discuss from the medical perspective, because for those who don't know, and Eric, before we get into the video itself, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves again for everybody in the audience who might not know you at this point, because you are an expert in your field. You are a medical expert. You see patients, and you know from the inside how this might impact people and how it will impact those. And we want your perspectives on that today. So, Eric, do you mind introducing yourself for everyone in the audience who might not know you?
Hey, everybody. Dr. Eric Lulov. I am the Chief Executive and Medical Officer of the West Boca Center for Wound Healing in Coconut Creek, Florida. I am the contributing medical editor to Blue Amp Media here on Substack and blueamp.co. You've seen me on the Diogenes Show with Nick and Walter and Evan. You've seen me on with Dr. Angela Rasmussen. We've talked about virology. I'm a national healthcare policy expert on both on the DME side for durable medical equipment and for health policy. I have been in the room at HHS with these people over the last few administrations, so I have a very tight grip on how they write policy and how they try to input policy across both Medicare, Medicaid, private insurers. So that's my role here today, is going to be giving some color commentary for Nieta and Nick on this topic. It is their show. I'm the third wheel today. So thanks for having me on, though. I appreciate it.
Eric, you're not the third wheel. Stop saying you're the third wheel.
I'm the back right of the tricycle. and I bring a little brevity. So.
Hey, having 3 wheels, just like having 3 legs on a stool, makes it more stable. It's less likely to wobble. That trifecta, triangles. That's why they use them in construction. It's the strongest shape there is. And so having the 3 of us is going to be really important. I told Eric beforehand, and I tell him a lot anyways, is I really value his opinion. I value his expertise, and I value the fact that he is willing to give us time and speak with us, not only because he's my friend, but also because I know he knows what he's talking about, and I know he's with us. And so I am so thankful for you joining us for this. And Naida, as always, I'm so thankful for you just being yourself and having this community that you have created in the disability community for democracy that you founded to advocate for disability rights and freedoms and equality and equity in our society. And hopefully y'all are thankful that we're doing this, because we cannot be silent, because first they came for the disabled people.
Yeah. And I want to just say something. I know this country's always been this way, and I say this as somebody who is not white, but this country has always been this way in terms of like the eugenics and things like that, but it's never been this bad. It's never been so blatantly like, we don't want trans people here. we don't want people with disabilities here. They're taking what happened in the 1930s in Italy and in Germany, right? Because we always give Italy a pass. They were just as bad until they came on our side, and then it was all cool in the gang. They they took what we did in this country, built on it, and then it got exported back, and it's getting built on again. And so it's full circle, and it's gross, and it's dangerous, and unfortunately we have people who don't care about anybody's humanity, and I say this all the time. This is about humanity versus non-humanity, regardless of where you are politically on the scale. This is right versus wrong, as Jasmine Crockett would say. This is not about conservative versus left versus right. This is about humanity, because there are plenty of quote unquote conservatives who do not agree with this BS because they think humanity is key. So just want to say that. And we wouldn't have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. We wouldn't have the ADA without actually conservatives. They're the ones who signed the bills into law. It was Republicans that were conservative who signed the bills into law.
It was George H.W. Bush who signed the bill into law. And we need to give credit where credit is due, and what was done to ensure rights for the disability community and those of us with disabilities. And I want to read actually just a small quote that is attributed to George H.W. Bush from when he signed the ADA into law. Was, in signing the law, President George H.W. Bush declared that the ADA, quote, takes a sledgehammer to a wall, which has for too many generations separated Americans with disabilities from the freedoms they could glimpse but not grasp, end quote. And I think that's a really powerful statement, and it shows how far the conservative movement has shifted to the right and regressed in their views, because this is over a century-old fight. Institutionalization in America started in the 1800s, and it wasn't until 1999 that it was declared by the Supreme Court in the Olmstead decision that folks with disabilities deserved to not be segregated and deserved the same freedoms and access rights as everyone else. And so I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to pull up this video. Like I said, we'll break it apart. We'll stop it into a couple key moments. We've also got over Naida's head. Actually, I'll switch it so it's a little easier to see. Over my head here, right there, is a QR code where you can read the memo that the DOJ just put out on Thursday evening about the Olmstead decision. It is disgusting. It is a regression in every way, and we can action on it. And that's why we're here, is so that we can begin the action process, or continue the action process that we have begun. And Naida will talk about what we've already done, what we're going to be doing more, who we're trying to contact. And again, if you are in the audience and you know somebody in any position of government, local to federal, contact them about this. Contact them.
Can I say something? Because I'm also
absolutely.
a local official. So I am a member of my city's Disability Commission Advisory Board. I am the secretary. And I am actually going to be bringing this up. I'm going to send an email out to the staff to put this on the agenda for next month's meeting, because I want people to understand that the federal government can't do anything without state, county, and local government. And as somebody who comes from that world, I just, and I'm not throwing shade to anybody who just does Substack, right? And we need people, we need media, we need people who are going to do the media side. But I do that and government and run my organization and looking for paid work, right? Like I do it all. And I want people to understand that everyone can do something, even if it's going to your city council meeting and saying, this is BS, like we need you to put out a statement as a council, or your county legislators. Also, the thing I will say, all the progressives, right? Because, like there's a lot of talk about progressive candidates, we need progressives. I need those who are supporting progressive candidates specifically to reach out to those candidates and ask them, what is your position on this? Because if they're silent or they're like, they're for it, they're not for humanity. And I actually said something to Jasmine Thomas, who I interviewed in April during the autism awareness special for Tell You No Lie. And I emailed her campaign, and she posted something about why she's running for office. And that's what you want. You want people to speak up on this. And reason why she's running for office is because she knew. Everybody said she was being hyperbolic, that this is not going to happen. They're not going to reinstitutionalize, people. And she has a son on the autism spectrum. And she's a licensed practical nurse. And she's like, over my dead body. Nobody's doing anything. So I am going to run for U.S. Senate in Oklahoma. And so these are the people you want in office, regardless of where they are politically. You want people who care about humanity first. And I wish Cassidy did not confirm RFK, because we're in this mess, because this is all RFK's doing in the background, because he agrees with this lawsuit, this 504 lawsuit. This is a response to the 504 lawsuit, to the integration mandate regulations that came out under the Biden administration. So there's 6 states that are suing. Texas is the lead state. They don't want to stand up to these states and say, no, you're wrong. They're capitulating because they're cowards and saying, no, we're not going to enforce the integration mandate. And so they write this memo on this to cover their butts. I'm getting off my soapbox.
No, we're all right. So let's get into our video here real quick, and then we'll start getting Eric's opinion on all of this. We're going to start getting, we would love to continue hearing y'all's feedback in the chat. We are seeing you on Substack with the conversations you guys are having. Oh, we lost Eric, and now he's back. What's going on? Anyway, we're going to switch over here to the video. We'll, like I said, breaking it down into segments. It's 3 minutes long, but I'll stop it probably just about a minute in. It's got some really good history points. It's a very simple explanation of what Olmstead is, what the decision is, and a little bit of the history of how we got there. So listen while we can for this one. We are going to be breaking it down as we go. And good morning, everyone. Continue hitting the heart as you come on in. Let's get this conversation as large as we can. We need as many people as possible listening as loudly as they can.
Activists in the independent living movement organized to demand an end to segregation for Americans with disabilities, who were denied basic rights like attending schools, holding jobs, or choosing homes. This led to a major milestone with the U.S. Supreme Court's Olmstead decision. Like Brown versus Board of Education, the decision that ended racial segregation in public schools, Olmstead affirmed the idea that nobody can be separated from society and denied the right to make decisions for themselves. But it wasn't always this way.
Okay. So before we get any further in this one, and because this will get into the history portion of it here, and just so that we have our talking over the videos so we don't get any content violations or things like that on YouTube or the other platforms, is Olmstead. The Olmstead decision came from a case out of Georgia. It took years for this case to get through, and it was from two women in Georgia. I'll make sure I get their names correctly for us. It was with two women out of Georgia, Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson, who had both had diagnoses of mental health conditions and intellectual disabilities, and they found themselves required in and out of state hospital and state hospitalization and state institutionalization, where they could have been much better served. One, they had a release diagnoses and release consent from their providers, and it took years before they were released from these institutions and allowed to have in-home or in-community care, which they deserved and needed. And so, Naida, do you want to talk a little bit on this, or Eric, do you want to talk into this before we get going any further?
I just wanted to say one thing about that. This case started in 1995. I was in high school. Just want to remind people, this was not a long time ago. People are going to say, oh, it's a long time ago. No, it wasn't. It was in my lifetime. It was in everybody's lifetime that's on this screen.
I was 5 when this started.
Okay, so I just really want to be clear there. The other thing I do want to say is that it was the state that was holding them, right? And that's what ends up happening a lot of times in these situations, is that the doctors can say, hey, you can leave, and then the state will say, nope, you can't. And that's why they ended up suing. The case was brought by the Atlanta Legal Aid Society on behalf of Lois Curtis. Both of these women have passed. And I do want to say something about Lois. She actually gave a painting, and I remember reading about this in the paper at the time, to President Obama when he, at the time. And I just want people to understand that all of the community-based services that we have now is due to cases like this, due to the peer support movement as well. They're talking about independent living, but it was not only independent living, it was also the mental health MAD movement who fought for these services as well. And the case actually sped up getting these services into community. I don't have anything else to say about it, because I could go into the weeds about budgets and government contracts and all of that, because I worked in that space. But Eric, I don't know Medicaid, but I do know the block grant piece of things.
So I had to step away because I had my AC guys here at my office fixing it, because somebody decided to take my drain line off of my unit up on the roof. So how far did you guys get into the not the healthcare aspect, but just the legality of it?
We haven't gotten too far yet. This is just an introduction of what these rights established.
Right. So the biggest thing here is there's a practical element to all this that Nia can certainly comment more than me, but like that the practical effect of this opinion, and let's put it right now, just the framing of it is that this is a legal opinion. The ADA is still the law of the land. Section 504 is still the law of the land. But the issue here is how, like everything else, it's like a traffic light, right? You can run the light, but it's does the cop pull you over, right? Do they enforce the law? And the issue here is that it doesn't erase the ADA and it doesn't erase Section 504. But what it does is it diminishes the DOJ's responsibility to challenge unnecessary institutionalizations of people. And what that does is if the government effectively steps back from enforcing the ADA, okay, in this case, in particular, this particular section, then what happens is that people with disabilities and advocates are now going to have to rely more on private litigation, on state advocacy and disability rights to protect these rights, like Nieta's organization, where there just isn't monetary capital, not a lot of it. And that's why it's so important that the federal government, that the actual institution of the DOJ is the one supposedly fighting for all Americans in this issue, because this is what the Nazis did. They went after the disability community in Germany. They didn't go for the Jews first. They went after the disabled community. They went after the people who were on the outskirts of society that were not, quote unquote, Aryan. And that's where they started all this from. And then it went to the Jews, and then it went to the gypsies and the blacks. And that's where it starts from, everybody. And this is fascism and eugenics combined in its core. And this is the part where I get really irate with it, because we're looking at this intersection and this merger of eugenics and fascism in our government. And it's at the DOJ, it's at HHS, it's in the DOD, it's in the VA. We're seeing it. It's already at education, commerce, energy. We're seeing this across. That's why these people are, excuse my language, they're so fucking evil. It's disgusting. Like, this is like the most un-American government administration we've had in our history. And it just so happens to be our 250th year of our birthday of our founding. Like, are you kidding me that this is where we're at right now? So I'll get into the healthcare stuff, but I wanted to
Can I ask you a question? Because I know I know Nick is Jewish. You're also Jewish, correct?
Yes.
I also have Jewish ancestry on my mother's side, and I also have Jewish uncle by marriage. And all of us, if we were in Germany, would be part of the final solution. And we get it. And I've been trying to talk to people and say, right now, the fights we're having need to stop, because they're coming for all of us. And we do not have time for purity politics. We need everyone. I don't care. I'm just going to say this. I don't care if your Substack has 10 people, 10 subscribers, or you have 100,000 subscribers. Everyone should be talking about this either through notes or through an article. And if you don't know how to write about it, Nick and I both my organization wrote a statement on this. Nick wrote a wonderful article on it. You can just share the article over and over and over again. We need to get these reads into the 50s, the 60s, like people reading the whole thing through for both of our articles. Because the more people who read, the more people who are going to actually want to do something.
The quickest way to share, if you don't know how to write, is just to restack and to repost. If you're not cross post, if you're afraid of your voice, which you don't need to be, and nobody should be ever afraid of their voice, but I understand it exists, and not everybody's meant for this type of platform and this type of conversation, but you can do your part at home just by seeing something you read and reposting it, and then tagging somebody else. Tag Nick, tag Nieta, tag me, tag a slew of people on here that will at least look at it. And then if we find value in it, we'll also repost it. And I try to repost a lot of the contributors that I read, my friends on here, other people I subscribe to. It's important that we constantly are getting messages out, because that's how we educate. That's how we learn. That's how we learn from each other. That's how we listen louder.
It's your sphere of influence, and your sphere of influence can be one person. It can be 200,000, a million, however large or small it is. You have a sphere of influence. Use it. This is the time to use your sphere of influence, because you will not get other chances if this continues. They will silence us. That is the goal, because compliance is their process. They want compliant citizens. They want fearful citizens. They don't want people speaking up and speaking out when the things are being proposed. We cannot wait till it becomes codified in law to speak out. We have to do it while it's only a memo. We have to do it now so that we can force legislation. We can force the legislators to do their jobs. We can force local city councils and local and your state legislation to do their jobs, to codify these rights into law that should have always been there.
Because
Now is the time we act, not after.
so just FYI, like Olmstead is not codified into law. It is a Supreme Court decision. Like Roe v. Wade was, like Shelby County, like Calais, all of those are Supreme Court decisions. And so we cannot, we failed. And everybody has their, I have a, like I'm my own business kind of sort of when it comes to abortion care. Is not my business what people do with their own bodies. But we failed there. Everybody thought this would be precedent forever and it was never going to get overturned. We have a Supreme Court right now that overturns precedent left, right, and center. And I just want to say that we need this codified into law, in federal law, so they cannot overturn it. So Nick, I'm ready for you to play the next part of the video.
Yeah, let's get into this next part here, because it hasn't always been this way, and this is a quick history lesson for folks on to how we got here for the Olmstead decision.
For decades, Americans with disabilities were largely housed in facilities like nursing homes, psychiatric hospitals, or in developmental disability institutions, where residents had to follow rules about things like when and what they could eat, when they could go outside, and even who they were allowed to date or marry. Society had an institutional bias, leaving few alternatives for people with disabilities. Disability activists fought back by organizing. From the 1960s to the 80s, activists staged protests and demonstrations, cases moved through the courts, and new legislation was passed, expanding access to housing, education, employment, and healthcare. Finally, a sweeping civil rights bill known as the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990. Despite this progress, there were still gaps. People with disabilities could still be institutionalized. Then, in 1999, the case of Olmstead versus Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson was brought before the Supreme Court. In the Olmstead decision, the court concluded that people with disabilities have a right to receive state-funded supports in the community rather than in facilities, affirming the argument that had been made by advocates for decades.
Let's stop that right there for a moment, because I think that's a really important point to begin moving forward from, is state-funded support in the community rather than forced institutionalization. And we have a right to it. It's our right. It's not a privilege. It's not any of that other bullshit. It is a fundamental right. It is an unalienable right that we get to make decisions for ourselves, that we have autonomy over our bodies and our choices. We could marry who we want to marry. We can live in our communities. We don't get put away. And Eric, I know I want to talk to you about, I want to get your opinions on this part too. Naida, you as well. And then wrap this a little bit into how this is going to impact all of us, especially those in the veteran community right now. And we're going to bridge gaps because it impacts the entire community. I know the veteran community because I'm a disabled veteran, and I can speak on my disabilities and the fears that we have, and I have, of forced institutionalization and what it does to the mental health community within the VA, and what it will do to veterans as a result. And so I want to get y'all's opinions on this part.
Eric, do you want to talk about like how Medicaid and Medicare plays
Yeah.
into this, and I can talk about the block grants?
Yeah. So in essence, everybody, here's what happened. So when the ADA was passed and signed in 1999, right? I'm sorry, in 1990. And then so what basically happened, and then the Olmstead decision, what it basically did was it mandated this home and community-based service waiver, okay, through Medicaid. So Medicaid became the primary financial service for the disability community because even though they were optionally, historically were always like state benefits, and before they were not mandatory entitlements. Now it became a mandatory entitlement under Medicaid, which is the gap that the opinion is now exploiting. Okay. So this is the real key here with the healthcare policy decision that they're making, is that they are now exploiting this gap between this not being a mandatory entitlement, but a optional state benefit. So this is what we're talking about when the government is saying we're going to block grant the state's Medicaid money. Now it's up to each state on how they ration the Medicaid money they receive from the federal government. The problem here is that if the states are no longer pressured to provide services to the community, that legal lever that the home-based community services warns that default reliance is now going to weaken. And that's what's going to expose the entire disability community. And we're not just talking about patients and people with physical disabilities. Okay. We're talking about people who are veterans, people who are traumatized with birth defects, mental health deficiency and disability. Remember, the ADA is all encompassing. It covers everything from both physical and mental. And then there's the issue of Nick's, like for example, for Nick, what we've talked about before is the VA re-rating veterans on their disabled payments, which I have gotten notices from like this, asking me to re-rate my veteran patients who have gotten older, which disabilities don't improve as you get it's like all the same.
No.
They get worse.
They get worse. I can attest. I can attest to.
Right.
I can attest to it too. They get worse.
So here's the real struggle part. So remember the big, stupid, beautiful bullshit bill, okay, cut $1 billion from Medicaid, which by the way, nobody's feeling right now because those cuts were designed to go into effect in January of 2027 after the midterms. Right, so that the voters wouldn't feel the effect of it when they're going to the voting booth. Okay, they designed all this to be after the midterms. So, and I'll clean up my thought here in a second. So here's the other issue too. So when they're institutional care, like nursing facilities, ICFs, okay, state hospitals, which are generally a Medicaid benefit. So now the states are going to get budget constrained because they're not going to have to both fiscally and legally cover to steer people toward these facilities because the home and community-based services that Medicaid normally would fund is gone. So now all these states, the 6 states that are in this lawsuit, which are mostly the red states, right? Texas, like how much more can the Texas government absorb from a financial standpoint? They don't have an electrical grid. It's like they're imprisoning everybody in Texas.
They build everywhere. They don't have, it's one of the worst states in the union. And just to respond to what Eric is saying, this memo is a response to the Section 504 lawsuit on the integration mandate.
Yep.
That regulations that came out under the Biden administration, which they have been enforcing, by the way, during this administration. It's not like they haven't been, but like they did the first time they said, oh, we're not going to enforce the transgender, language in the regulations. They're now saying that they're not going to enforce the regulations around the integration mandate either under Section 504. That's what this memo is basically saying. And I just want to remind people that Eric's talking about Medicaid and Medicare. I come from the peer advocacy.
Oh, no, I haven't gotten to Medicare yet.
Yeah, but I know you haven't talked about Medicare, but you are going to talk about Medicare. I come from the peer advocacy world, and those are block grants, right? So if you go to a peer support center or independent living center, these are grants that the federal government gives to these federal government. Sometimes it's a pass-through grant, sometimes it's straight through. I worked for one of these agencies that were government adjacent, basically. And when they do cuts like this, it affects the services that these agencies can provide, because they can't bill private insurance or bill the people who are receiving peer support services. They can't bill Medicaid in a lot of states. New York State there are states that actually have Medicaid codes for peer support, but most states don't still. And peer support has been around for a long time, for over 20 years. So I just want to just piggyback on that, because that's also where this is going. It's not just the Medicaid and Medicare cuts, but it's also the block grants that these nonprofits who work in these spaces also receive on the disability side.
Well, before you guys get too far into this, actually, Eric, you say what you want to say there, and I'll play the rest of the video, because it actually now the next part of the video touches on a simple breakdown of like the average cost of institutionalization versus in-home community care, and it's staggering how inexpensive in-home community care is compared to institutionalization care.
I want to touch upon the political answer to this, because this is the mindset of how the Medicaid cuts were instituted. Okay, I think having this kind of background. So what we really need to understand is that, like, the Republicans didn't change their theory on disability. What they changed was their theory of how government should operate. Okay, and it's the one that the disability historians, and Nieta, you can comment on this, is that the Republicans' relationship to federal power changed itself, and disability rights got swept up into this whole thing. Is that the Republicans shifted from this party that focused on using government to enact conservative policies to a party that just wants to defang the entire government, right? So it's now a party that's completely surrounded itself around deregulation, federalism, and shrinking the administrative state. Okay, and what's really happened here is the National Review ran a piece, and I did some research before going on the show, that in 1990, when the ADA was signed, the National Review ran a piece that was called "Disabling the GOP." The Heritage Foundation founder, Ed Follner, lumped the ADA in with other 1990-1991 legislation, quoted, and I'm quoting him directly, as a new onslaught of economic and social nannyism. Okay, so that the conservative movement's intellectual infrastructure never really bought into this, and then it was overridden by a coalition of legislators. And when the coalition now has aged out, all the skepticism is now resurfaced again, and that's how we got to where we are today. Okay, and remember, the original legislation was forged by Bob Dole and Daniel Inouye from Hawaii. Okay, because they were both disabled from Vietnam.
No, World War II.
Sorry, World War II. Thank you. And then Tammy Duckworth, and Dan Crenshaw. So like Dan Crenshaw it's like more meaner at this point. Like, and so because Dole left Congress, so that whole World War II generation that aged out of Congress, with the exception of Grassley, who never served. But like the point being is that as that World War II disability community has aged out of Congress, the entire shift on disability and how it should be funded based on this war that Heritage Foundation's been waging on the government through the Republican Party, and now they have a complete patsy through the entire executive cabinet. So that's where we're at today, everybody. That's where all this kind of has stemmed from, and it started 30 years ago.
And Naida, there's been a couple questions in the chat, and before I get into the final segment of the video, could you quickly break down what peer support means so that everyone is clear on what we're talking about?
So peer support in terms, and I'm going to talk about it in the mental health frame first, because it's easier that way. So in the peer support model, it's self-help, right? It's self-help, but there's certain principles, and you can Google what the principles are of peer support. One of the things in the peer support mental health agencies need to be at least 51% people who have a psychiatric diagnosis. That's the bare minimum. Usually a lot of those agencies have higher. I worked in one where it was 100% in terms of staffing, and a lot of these people have, and this was old school, like this was like 2000, so a lot of us had multiple like inpatient psychiatric being institutionalized for at least 3 weeks or more in private facilities or in state facilities. And so we wanted to move, we were fighting, we call it the mad movement, right? Like we were fighting for civil rights for our basic humanity not to be institutionalized. We wanted to get out because they were drugging us, they were doing shock treatments, they were doing all sorts of things to us. I had been over medicated at one point during the transition from the peer support model. And then just to add on to that, some people in the MAD movement wanted to have more outpatient professional treatment through ACT teams and crisis teams. So all those crisis teams that people are talking about now that they want to fund actually started, was not from Black Lives Matter, actually started in the MAD movement, and we want less police interaction, we want less state interaction, we want professionals who are doing the job. That's why the peer-to-peer portion has become professionalized, has become part of Medicaid, and not in all states, but in some states, especially in the Northeast where I live, like in New York and Massachusetts, they can now bill Medicaid because they see the value in it, because it's cheaper for somebody to go to a mental health agency run by 100% or at least 51% by people who have a psych diagnosis, understand the experience, what it's like about being independent, building your life, versus being in an institution where you have no freedom. And this is what they want to do. And I do want to say something about the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation are intellectually dishonest individuals, because there are plenty of conservatives that I actually know who actually are the never Trumpers that I've actually met, that don't buy into their BS about shrinking the administrative state to the like shrinking down the bucket. They understand that you need actually administrative state to actually do some of the things that need to happen. These people are racist, they're ableist, they're homophobic, and they're transphobic, and they're sexist. Not everybody who's conservative is that. And also, I do want to say one more thing. The left isn't much better because they don't speak up on these things. And some of them actually are for institutionalization. Key point, New York State and California has expanded who could be institutionalized in psych hospitals involuntarily if you're homeless.
Well, they've expanded the Baker Act. That's what they've done. They've expanded the role of the Baker Act but it's also a way to get things paid for and funded.
Yeah.
By institutionalizing people in the ER. And this is where I wanted to kind of get into the whole Medicare conversation.
Go ahead.
Let's do the end of the video real quick, and then we'll get into that, so we can close out on that as a really good point for this. And thank you everyone for being here with us. Continue to smash that heart. Thank you all for putting in your amazing comments. I'm listening and reading everything that you guys are writing. So thank you everyone. Thank you all for being here with us. And so let's finish out this video because this is important. Then we'll get into the Medicaid and Medicare discussion that does come from with what Eric has to say and what they speak a little bit on here in this last section of the video.
Having these choices isn't more expensive. In fact, it costs less. In 2009, the National Council on Disability found the annual cost of institutional care was more than community-based supports in every state. $188,000 per person in a facility versus only about $42,000 for comparable services in the community. Later, cases based on Olmstead pushed states to create plans to reduce their institutionalized populations. Yet, progress has been slow. According to the last US Census in 2010, over 2 million people were housed in some kind of facility. But community living isn't just a preference, it's a civil right. That's the legacy of the Olmstead decision. You have the right to choose your community and the right to access supports you may need in your home rather than in a facility. For more information in Washington State, contact Disability Rights Washington at 800-562-2702 or go to disabilityrightswa.org.
Good luck finding that video in the state of Texas.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we finished out that video fully so that we can also have context on who produced it. It's important that we advocate and continue to advocate for this. So Eric, go back in. I want you to talk about the Medicare Medicaid side because this is really important.
Right. So thank you. So as we talked about before, Medicaid plays the largest role in all this because of the block grants. Medicaid plays a much smaller role, but so Medicare is going to cover the acute and post-acute episodes. So you get hospitalized, then you go to a subacute step-down unit. So that's like skilled nursing, home health, and medical needs, home health nursing, skilled nursing, long-term acute care, but more for post-acute care. But not the long-term custodial stuff that Niet and I have been talking about, which is the home-based community care stuff that the Olmstead community really depends on, right? So, but here's the risk that Medicare is, because it's more indirect for dual eligible beneficiaries. These are patients who are Medicare and Medicaid, which are the majority of the disability population, because they're not able to work, so they're on Medicare disability, and then they have Medicaid to cover drug therapy and durable medical equipment, and that's how that works. So what happens is it's a weakened community infrastructure. So you're weakening the infrastructure surrounding the disability community. And then what that means is that more people are now going to cycle through Medicare covered hospitalizations and then short-term skilled nursing stays. And what that does is it unstabilizes the discharge to the community when they have to leave the skilled nursing, because Medicare will only cover the first 100 days. After that, they have to be permanently placed into a skilled nursing facility. But the problem is there's such a shortage of Medicaid-based facilities. And listen, the ones that are strictly Medicaid-based are really scary to be in. I mean, like as a patient, it's like think about like the hotel from like The Shining, but like 10 times worse, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is it will increase institutionalization by default, because then these people don't have anywhere, they can't go back home because there's no community care funding. So it literally leaves this gap, and that's what this opinion is really going after. It's if you almost look at it like how there's like this corporate grift going on with the administration, where all the money's being shifted to larger corporations, it's the same thing. Think about how the shift financially then goes to all this private Medicare funding for people who own these institutionalized facilities, that they're basically being paid directly through government contracts, not through Medicare, Medicaid, but they're being paid by government contracts to fund and care for people that they don't give a flying fuck about. That they really dead. And then they'll just leave these people in their beds or in their wheelchairs, sitting in the hallway, slumped with no therapy, no occupational therapy, no lifelong learning, lifelong education, no skill development, so they could become a taxpayer and start to and like the things that Nieta, like your community does, where you're trying to get people to actually have value in life, right? They could do something with their life and have some value and be a part of society. And this is like the really disgusting part of all of this. It's the devaluing of a human life. And that's about.
And I just want to just say to Eric, to this, if you look up Gerardo Rivera's report on Willowbrook and you look up the quotes for Robert F. Kennedy Sr., RFK Jr.'s father, who went to Willowbrook in the 1960s, said that that place basically needed to be shut down. That's what they want to take us back to, right? And I just want people to understand I've worked in these facilities in the 2000s, and they were not great, but they were better than they were. And the psych and the state clinics also weren't great, but they were better than they were. All of that progress that was made in these state facilities and county facilities as well, it's not just the state, it's also the county facilities as well, local in city facilities. Like in New York City has their own hospital system where people languished in those places as well. This is why it's so important. And I am putting out a plea. Please contact your city council, contact your county government, contact your state legislators for them to say no to this DOJ memo. Also, we are talking about this from a US 50 state DC. There's also our territories, which has issues, which has Medicaid is different depending on which territory you live in. And so these territories like Puerto Rico, US Virgin Island, Guam, we have a two-tier citizenship system in this country. And so if you live there, your access to Medicaid and all the entitlements suck anyway. In Puerto Rico, you can't even get SSI, for example. And I just want people to understand that a lot of people who are from these places come to the United States so they can get services. If they can't afford to come here, they're staying there. This legal opinion gives them cover, especially the territories, even more so than the states, to say we're just following what the federal government's telling us because they don't have full autonomy. And so I want people to understand that we got to look at this beyond our 50 states and DC. We also got to worry about our US citizens, our friends and family in the territories. I'm Puerto Rican on my mother's side. I have family who lives in Puerto Rico still. And I'm concerned about this. This personally impacts my family who still lives there.
Yeah. And this is going to be something that we are talking about nonstop and doing things about nonstop. Naida and I are working on getting you guys templates, getting ourselves templates for emailing and faxing. There are free ways you can fax your federal representatives at the very least. We're going to get together these scripts so that you can call, and then we're going to organize to do it together. We're not going to do it alone.
Phone calls are the best, especially in an election year. Phone calls are huge.
Phone calls and faxes, they are hard to ignore. You cannot ignore the fax machine coming in. Nope. You can ignore an email, but fax puts it on paper and it makes it more real because they go, oh shit, I got a fax. People don't get faxes all the time. And if we flood them with nonstop streams together, it will make a difference. And I've already contacted friends in different media groups, on different publications, who know others, and I'm working to get our message out with other media organizations. I will let them speak for themselves. I will not name them until they're ready to put out their messages themselves. I think that's the appropriate choice on that. But I have spoken to multiple people, and I'm going to continue speaking to people on the veteran community side, on the non-veteran side, because We have to make the difference before it becomes legally binding. We have to make the difference now.
Let me imagine if this was the Obama administration that was doing this.
Or how about we don't talk about Obama? How about Biden? If this was Biden,
just imagine if it was Biden.
Imagine this shitstorm would be coming down on the right if this was a Democratic administration doing this shit. Not that it would happen under a Democratic administration, but just imagine if it wasn't somebody that they were lockstep behind, blindly following, going off the cliff, right? But I want to tie, I have one more point on the insurance side. I want to tie it together real quick before we move on to, because I know we talked about the mental health component of this, and that's the other part of this conversation that we're going to talk about. But let me talk about the private insurer side, and this is where Medicare Advantage comes in. Okay. So right now is that with private insurer, and I want to throw Medicare Advantage in because when you're on Medicare Advantage, you are with a private insurer. Okay. I can't stress this enough. That's why we call it Medicare Disadvantage. Okay. Is that private insurers are outside the Olmstead framework. So we're talking like United Healthcare, Blue Cross, Cigna, Aetna. They're all outside of this. But when they are now participating in Medicare Advantage, they are now folding in these supplemental health community-based services into their benefit packages. But the broader concern is very normative for them. What they're going to do, if the federal posture is going to shift to treating institutional care as an acceptable default, okay, then what's going to happen is it's going to ripple into what we call utilization management decision making. So now somebody at United Healthcare, for example, or Aetna, okay, this is literally going to be like an AI 1.2 second denial, okay, where you're going to go to an emergency room, they're going to determine that you qualify for an institutional benefit, but then the computer and the AI is going to deny it, and now you're sent back home. Okay, so now you're left without any resources, no substantive care, and what's going to wind up is that it's going to become the cheapest adequate setting against community placement. And this is what's going to wind up happening. When you do not allow people to be cared for in their own home, you're shifting it to institutions, which is going to bring in corporations, which is going to bring in utilization management issues. We just saw the video on the cost. It's literally like 66% less to care for somebody in their home versus to have them institutionalized. And when you start looking at the amount of money, we're already talking about this with diabetes and heart disease, and Medicare Advantage companies are basically bombarding my office with record requests so they can get more money. We already know that Medicare Advantage costs 20% more per beneficiary than traditional government Medicare. Okay, we already know that that's a 20% increase in cost. Imagine what this is going to do.
And let's also not forget, this is also something that I want people to realize here too, because if some of us, like my parents are both retired government employees, and this is the scary part for me, is that Medicare is their primary. Well, for my mother, because she's older than my stepfather, Medicare is her primary, and her union insurance is her secondary. And so this is the part that people don't understand. People are going to die. I'm just going to say, people are going to die because of this. And in terms of the mental health piece, people are going to end up in prison. Okay? Like, I did an interview with somebody a few weeks ago who talked about Rikers is the most expensive psychiatric hospital in the country, basically. And because New York City has to, like, shelters are even more expensive than supportive housing. And this is a supportive housing conversation. This is not even the institutionalization. Olmstead undercuts housing first, undercuts supportive housing, and they're going to say, and this is what they're trying to do, that if you're going to get housing, you need to meet all of these requirements. You need to be clean. You need to be clean and sober. You need to be taking your psych meds. You're going to have to be on treatment plans. And I'm talking about the mental health side specifically. That's what they're trying to do. This is a way for them to criminalize, to use that EO that they put out almost a year ago, to criminalize substance abuse disorders and mental health disorders, to say, have at it. Go ahead, throw them in jail, because there are not enough state institutional beds to do that. So they're going to throw them in prison. And there've already been cases around Olmstead that around this, and they're still trying to decide some of these cases. But I need people to understand that if you have a psych diagnosis specifically and you have a run-in with the police, it's not going to be ACT teams and crisis teams. It's going to be handcuffs and jail and prison. That's going to be how you get your treatment. And treatment in those facilities is terrible. So I just want to say that, because it's also important that that's what they're also using this for as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to put up, thanks for reminding me to do it. I put up on the side here is Naida's article, Say No to Crip Crow. It's the official statement. It's Naida's official statement from the Disability Community for Democracy. Please go read this article. I will also drop the link for anyone in the Substack chat. Make sure you go read what Naida has said. And what we talked about earlier too was there's some simple, easy initial steps you can take to spread awareness about what's going on. And those first steps are sharing the article. Is share the article, cross-post the article. If you're on Substack, you have the ability to cross-post articles, which means you send the article directly to your subscribers to feed directly back to the original publication's article. You can put a little block at the top of what you thought about the article. It's a quick little review, but you post it and you send it to all of your subscribers. And what we were talking about earlier is your sphere of influence. It doesn't matter if your sphere of influence is one. That one person has their own sphere of influence too. It's that rule of two thing, doubles. Every time you talk to one person, they'll go talk to two more. And that spreads. And so thank you to who just scanned the QR code. Thank you to all of the folks who are listening right now to this conversation. Go support what Naida has said and spread it. Spread the message and word that Naida wrote about this. And Naida, do you want to talk a little bit about the article itself that you put out and the official statement from Disability Community for Democracy, and how, because like always, we're here for action. I'm not here just to talk. We're not talking heads. We're not here to just do nothing. In the background, like I said before this, is I'm contacting people. Eric has contacted people. Naida has contacted people. We are putting together the scripts so you all can contact people. I'm going to be working to get us Lev Parnas has done a Calls for Congress style event where he and his team organize people being able to call Congress in a coordinated and responsive and meaningful way. We're going to do something similar. We're going to use that power, maybe with Lev, maybe not. I'm not saying anybody else. I'm just saying Lev because I work directly with him. We're going to use the power like that, the types of things, these coordinated calls for Congress, because it's incredibly powerful. It makes a huge statement when thousands of us call in at the same time. When even 10 people, even 100 people call the same congressional member or other congressional members, that makes a huge impact. And you've seen it before with events that the calls for Congress that Lev has done.
Epstein files. Epstein files is the biggest one we can point to that this worked, that people were calling and basically, stepping on their neck and not letting them up, like
social pressure works.
Yeah.
Social pressure works. Shame these people, and if it comes down to it, shame these people into doing what needs to be done. It's their job. They signed up to get told off by the American people.
They work for us. And I say this as somebody who works in government. I work for the people who live in my city. I work for everyone, specifically people with disabilities, but everyone who's connected to the disability community in my city. So I don't want to hear from anyone in the government saying that, oh, we can't. You got the wrong one with this. With you, I say this all the time. You got the right Puerto Rican on the wrong day. Don't try to blow smoke up my behind, because it's not going to work. Because I come from family members who, my mom used to work in Department of Social Services. She used to implement these programs. So I know how this stuff works, and they're playing games, and I'm not having it. I have friends. I'm going to talk about this personally. I rely on case management services to be in community because I struggle with a lot of different physical disabilities as well as my mental health. And if I don't have access to case management when I need it, especially around documentation and getting stuff together, I get really overwhelmed and I don't get anything done. And then I lose my access to services. I have lost my Medicaid because I didn't fill out a piece of paper and I forgot to call my case manager to do it. And people will say, well, you're functional, you can do things, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I can't always, right? Like, I can't.
People don't understand, like, the Medicaid paperwork to have to refile quarterly or now even monthly.
It's 6 months, every 6 months.
Yeah,
it's going to be hell for me.
Some are switching to quarterly because of
quarterly.
Florida's now quarterly.
It's all pressure to make it harder for the people who it impacts. It's a victim blaming mentality that we have turned into policy, and because we are lesser in ways,
these are just hateful
it
people.
Falls on us.
These are just very hateful people that do not deal with this, who don't have. I mean, listen. Look at the current president and look how he treats his son, who's autistic. We know Barron's on the spectrum, okay? He can't deal with his son being the way he is, which is why there's almost zero relationship.
Or his nephew.
Right? Or his nephew. Even look at his nephew. Right, his nephew. I mean, we are dealing with people who have a mentality of, you have a physical, and I see this a lot down here with the very wealthy, where they've got the financial resources and the parents basically just have a caregiver and the parents don't deal with their disabled children. We're not even talking like mental disability. We're talking about like physical disabilities. Forget the mental stuff. But like where it's just these people they live in a different fucking planet. Their mentality is different. They're not trained to have any, I mean, they love their children. There's a love there, but it's like, I can't be burdened. And this is what the Olmstead is. This is really what this is about. It's about somebody in the government or a group of people in the government at DOJ specifically who got a directive from Maha and from RFK Jr. through HHS to say, we can't be burdened with this section of our population who are not contributing to society, who are a drain on the federal system, because we have to pay for their support services through Medicaid. So let's just fuck them.
Yeah, well, if they actually enforce the ADA the way they were supposed to around access and around employment, a lot of people who are on disability and on Medicaid would not be. So they could miss me with that nonsense of like people don't work. There are a lot of people I know who have disabilities who don't work because of the way the laws around
Right.
reasonable accommodations and what that means and all of that. And the thing that I'm angry about, and I've been thinking about this too, and I'm gonna ask Nick a question. I'm concerned about our veterans, and this is the reason why I'm concerned about veterans. My uncle, as some of the audience know, died months ago. Died 3 months ago. He was in a veterans home, state veterans home. My mom fought to get him in there because it was better than where he was. He was in a Medicaid facility, which was terrible. He was like going downhill. His health, he was in and out of the hospital all the time because they weren't taking care of him. He was over medicated, and he had stage 4 cancer, and he also had like diabetes and heart disease and had a stroke and stuff like that as well on top of that. And he died of the effects of his cancer due to his military service. And that was the one thing he wanted, was if he was going to die, was to be in a veterans facility. I'm glad he's not alive right now. I miss my uncle. He's my favorite uncle who passed away. But I'm glad he's not alive right now, because I would be concerned about putting him in any facility that's tied to the VA or the state, because it was a state facility. I would be terrified. And I don't qualify. I'm the niece. I have multiple members of my family serve this country honorably. And so I want to ask Nick, as somebody who uses VA services pretty much only, not like my other relatives that have used both, but exclusively, mostly VA.
I'm exclusively through the VA. Yeah.
What is your thoughts on what's happening here with Olmstead and people freaking out?
It really scares me. It really scares me what is going on. And I put the link to my article up next to us also, that I put out yesterday. It was really just my raw thoughts on Olmstead or on what's happening. And it makes me really afraid. It brings out a lot of fears for me on going in and continuing my mental health care with the VA and what it might do and what they might try and do because of it. And I have both physical and mental disabilities. I have my entire life. And I have disabilities that I have been added into my tale of a human. I have developed additional disabilities. I'm one of the lucky ones in the VA because my VA rating cannot be touched. My VA rating cannot be touched. But so many others can. And I'm really lucky on that front because I'm afraid that it's going to or could impact my wife or my friends or my brothers or my dad or my cousins or anyone in my family who has served and who has a disability and is speaking up. Because that's where it's going to start, is because they know too that veterans who speak out the loudest cause change. Veterans speaking out the loudest causes change because veterans are the most diverse community in the country. The most diverse segment of the nation are military veterans across all walks of life, across every race, across every gender, across every socioeconomic class except for the Epstein class, because they don't give a shit about any of this unless they can send us off to die and get hurt. They want to silence us. They want to silence us, and for me, I use the VA for mental health care. I know people who have gone in willingly to what we call grippy sock vacations in all of it. Is they needed the support. They needed the care, and they were able to leave. They were able to get their care and go, I'm done. I've got the care I needed. I now need at-home support. And you know what the VA did at the time? They let them go home. That, if this becomes law and practice, will not be the standard. The standard would be if you go in and you get that support you need because you're in a mental health crisis or a physical health crisis or you're suicidal, you're not getting out. And that's the fear for me and so many veterans.
And their families as well.
Yeah.
Can I bring in the difference here, because I know we're talking about the VA, but I want to just touch upon the difference between what we're doing here and versus, let's say, like in the EU, to give some clarity and some perspective, right? So when we're talking about like the US, so our approach here rests on this anti-discrimination law, which is the ADA. Okay. It prohibits unjustified institutionalization. Okay. And it's basically, and states are required as of right now to provide community-based services if the treatment professionals determine it to be appropriate and the individual doesn't object. The EU,
That's section 2. That's section 2.
Section 2, right? So the EU approach is resting on more a positive human rights treaty obligation standard, and this was the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and that was in 2008. And it's if it doesn't matter what part of the EU they live in, all 27 member states are party to that convention. And the monitoring body has gone even further than any US authority. In 2017, the CRPD's committee general comment, I think it was like number 5 or whatever it was, clarified that they implemented an additional article that required the closure of all residential institutions. And actually that same committee has called for the complete elimination of all institutions. So basically, here's the big difference in the two is that the US protects against being wrongly institutionalized. The EU framework demands the abolition of all of the institutions altogether. And then this is the flip. So like on the enforceability side, the US is actually stronger because it's enforceable by individuals, as it's more narrow in the right. The EU is more broader but softer. So this is the paradox. And I think this is like, when I was doing this and I was like looking at the legality and the public policy issues, this is the paradox, really. The US has a narrow right, but it's harder on the law. The EU has a broader right, but softer on the law.
Yeah.
And this is where we could bring that together.
And we could juxtapose this and have some sort of hybrid, thing. But like, remember, EU funds most of this by universal social insurance or tax-funded systems that are not means tested in the same way as contingent as a state offering to choose to offer a waiver. Okay. Yeah. The European Union, the disabled person living in the EU are generally less likely to evaporate their rights because of budget reclassification like they are here. Okay. But they're also subject to more slow national reform versus a sharper instrument of a lawsuit. So, and in here it's mostly Medicaid, federal, state hybrid. So, but the honest caveat here that to join all these together, I wouldn't read the EU as a total success story. Okay, that the EU's broad right, even though it places institutional populations and no clean national model. So like, it's kind of like messier. So there's no accurate comparison to say that the EU is doing it better than we are. Is that the two systems fail separately and differently. And the EU has more grander aspirations, but it's struggling to operationalize the whole thing. And listen, this is a difficult problem, and I understand your point, Nick, your point, you guys are, we're all trying to advocate. I'm trying to advocate for the patient side, and yet both of you being disabled are Nick on the VA side, and yet I'm more on the private consumer driven community based side. We all serve a purpose here. We could come up with a better system, but the issue is that we can do this as a community. The question is, we don't have the leadership in Washington with the will and the courage to do this type of social reorganization that we need. And
Well, we do.
that's the block we roll it into.
We do in the House. We have Congresswoman Presley, who's a member of the disability
In the House, we
community.
do. But the Senate's a much harder yank.
Yeah,
It's
and
a harder lift.
well, this is the thing, and we need to stop. We need to stop only fight to try to. We need to always fight to keep what we have, but we also need to be more aspirational around like expanding rights. And I've said this to disability advocates that I emailed yesterday around what the work I'm doing. I'm like, we need to expand the ADA, and some people are like, well, they're just going to get it anyway, and I'm like, then let them, because we've tried the separate laws, and I say this as somebody whose grandparents on my father's side were active in the civil rights movement. We tried having a separate law for civil rights 64, voting rights 65, and civil rights 1968,
And they've just dismantled it.
and it hasn't worked, right? So why not? It's easier to expand existing law, and I know this from even living here. I live in Massachusetts, where they just expanded existing law around the ACA, because we already had Romney Care in this state. We already had a mandate for health insurance being required. It's easier to expand existing law than it is to write a whole new bill. And I don't think people understand that. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't have a degree. I don't have a master's degree in public administration. I know a lot about this because of like my family. Like my mom has a degree in that. I have a lot of friends who are attorneys and stuff like that. But I live and breathe policy because I understand it. I know way too much to be dangerous. And that's what we need. We need to expand our laws, not create new ones. That was the mistake, I feel, of the civil rights movement. We need to expand the laws that we have and codify Olmstead into the ADA. We need to like take all this Maha BS and say, nah, no registries involuntarily. Codify all the BS and get rid of it, and have laws that aren't allowed to do that. So if we get somebody like the current occupant and people like that ever again, it's going to be way harder for them to do this stuff. The reason why we're in this position is that we've always counted on norms. And norms are helpful when people honor them. We have people who are not honoring norms, especially this time around. And we need actual things in black and white so we can hold them accountable. That's how come we're able to hold people accountable currently. So that's what I wanted to say.
No, I think that's really important to mention too, is that we need to be expanding the laws that are already on the books, or fixing the laws that are on the books, or correcting them. We need to get away from the Supreme Court made a decision on a case without a law then being made behind it too, because we cannot let these norm precedents undermine us, because we normed and traditioned ourselves into this mess by saying, oh, we've already established those. They're good. They're your unalienable rights. They're written down. We don't need to do more. We need to do more. We have to codify these things. It's why Roe v. Wade got overturned. It's why we have no digital data privacy, because for people who don't really understand, Roe v. Wade wasn't really about abortion. It was made into
privacy.
Something about abortion. It was about privacy and data privacy and your right to own and maintain your data privacy and your privacy. It's the same thing. We normed ourselves into this idea that we were secure on just a passing whim.
Because we relied on the good nature of people.
Stare decisis.
Right. And that's how autocracies start. when you start dismantling the will of the people, the goodwill of the people, with evil actors and private dirty money, dark money, inside politics, bullshit policies, the power cycle that goes through DC. It's we are like as great as the founding authors of our country had this ideal in this utopian type of government style. We have gotten complacent. We have gotten flat, gluttonous. We have gotten less engaged government wise. We've had less civic involvement, and this has all been designed by corporations to keep us occupied and chaotic so that we're not focusing on what's happening at local, state, and federal levels of government. We are too consumed with the scrolling through the feed and trying to make our lives more, thank you. I mean, Ashley and I just published this article today on Me Too has become me only. And it's about getting wrapped up in the feed and scrolling and your mental health, and you're becoming distracted because you're worried about where your next dopamine rush is going to come from on your post when you're looking at how many people liked your note, as opposed to, you know what, I'm just going to go take a walk and go enjoy life.
Yep.
And this is going into the mental health component of, I don't want to, I'm talking about public policy, but this is the mental health component of all this, is that there's a psychological harm to all this, which we can do on another episode. I don't want to get into it today because that's a whole other topic, but there's a psychological damage that will be done because of if this becomes more integrated and pushed through and instituted. And they've already done it, by the way. The first step was the Medicaid cut, because now it's given them the blueprint on how to do it.
Actually, the first step in all of this was the executive order on criminalizing homelessness and targeting the homeless population,
and the autism registry and RFK's comments.
But it's all eugenics.
This is what they're going to do. They're going to do all these cuts. They're going to institutionalize people, and then they're going to just hand them a phone and be like, "Have at it." That's what they're going to do, right? Like that's sad that we got to say it in that way. But we also have to be careful, because there's a lot of people within the disability community that cannot leave their homes or are COVID conscious, and this is how they do their activism. And we don't want to shame anybody for using social media.
No, but I'm also concerned about, like, it's the isolationism that social media brings with it on the mental health side. And I understand that you can't leave your home, and I understand for those of you that cannot leave your homes, that this is your outlet. I get it, and if as long as you're using it in a very healthy way and you're maintaining some level of social relationships outside of the computer screen, that you can go to and this is where this is why the support groups are so important, that the senior, the disability centers with transportation and all of these things, that the little things that we don't see, cutting Meals on Wheels. I mean, that's for some elderly, like that one service, having somebody bring you food, right? Because you cannot cook for yourself. And that just by seeing that volunteer once a week does wonders for people.
Or in my case, we have management in my building, and there've been like in the winter months, I can't leave my house because I do not want to damage my mobility devices. And so seeing the management company, going down there and asking them questions about, hey, this is a problem or that's a problem, like having that human interaction is important. It's the one thing I just want to put a button on all of this is that we also need to start taking disability seriously and stop seeing things just through a racial lens. I'm doing a conversation with Margaret Williams around white supremacy beyond race, because this is what it is. It's white supremacy through a eugenics lens. And I want people to understand that all of this infighting on who's doing what and the purity test, none of that is going to help us when they're rounding people like me and Nick up to put us in an institution because they don't think we are valuable enough to in society.
And that's my point, is it's what do you do from like the psychological damage that it does to both of you and to all of us as a whole, right? That the harm of having your foundational civil right protection publicly questioned by the agency who's designed to protect it.
I'm angry. That's
what this does.
I'm
angry.
afraid.
Nick's afraid, and I was angry, and I was like angry to the point because Nick saw my live stream. I went off.
Yeah, you did.
I went off. I don't care. I don't care. It
was an epic off.
I went off. I was like not calm at all. And I found out about this. Part of the reason why I went off, to be perfectly honest, just to share with the audience, if you haven't watched the 30-minute almost update, is because they did it during the Juneteenth weekend. And I say this as somebody who is black American.
Deliberate.
It's like, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. I cannot believe, like, really, you gonna take crap on my ancestors and basically practice eugenics? Because I want also people to remember this is going to disproportionately impact people who don't have needs. So I have some access. I have class proximity, thank God. So I have some protection. But people who are black and brown, who don't have that, have family members that don't have that. I have that because of my parents. I have that because of my grandparents. Cousins that don't have that because of who my uncle married. One of my uncles married. I have people who are poor whites who don't have that. People who are LGBTQ.
This isn't about race. It really isn't. It's not about the color. This is about wiping out a class of people who they feel are a drain on their economic burden of society. That's what this
And they've
is.
told us that before too. They've used those words.
They see the disability community as a line item thing that they can just pull off a ledger.
Right. They can't do that around race.
Rebalance that money in a ledger that goes to the oligarchy and the plutocracy.
They can't do that around race in the same way or other identities in the same way as they can disability, because people with disability need more actual support for ground level stuff. That's the difference, right? And I say this as somebody who is in marginalized multiply, is that if I didn't have a disability, right, I would just be like, well, it's not my problem, whatever, right? Like that's how a lot of Black people feel about this. A lot of Black and brown folks, it's like, this is not my issue, right? Like I'm seeing through this through just a racial lens. But when you're multiply impacted, and I understand there's a disproportional nature to disability, which is Black and brown folks, because of environmental racism, to be perfectly honest, is that, yes, it isn't a racial thing in terms of disability, but the people who are going to be the least likely to be able to fight back are going to be people who don't have any means at all. And that's usually people of color and people who are members of the LGBTQ community, especially trans folks, and poor whites, right? Like I'm going to be able to fight back. Mm-hmm. Because I know the system. I understand it. But what if you don't have the education that I have?
And you also just described most of the veteran community right there. Yeah. Was most of the veteran community is going to be impacted by this. A lot of the veteran community is on the poor side. Trust me, it ain't easy. And the only advantage, and I hate saying those words, but the only privilege or advantage we have on the veteran side is our disability payments do not get automatically reduced when we start working. And that's another big piece of the issue that we don't even have, we're not going to have time to talk about today, is the disproportionate impacts on your wages and the way that you can even afford to live by getting work. And so it's a cyclical system that forces people with disabilities to try and get on the service and then get shamed for not working while they're on the service. But when they start working and are still just as disabled as they were when they applied for the benefits, they don't get access to work, or they lose their benefits.
Right.
Unlike that in the veteran community, which it is going to impact us on those who are going to be re-rated, those who are going to lose their VA benefits or their monthly stipends that they do rely on to pay the minimum bills that they can.
Right. And also we don't have time to touch on this. There are different ways that people in the VA get their ratings. There's different types of disability payments. So there are disability payments where if you are disabled via combat versus you're getting your money through the VA, but it's non-combat related. Their guidelines are similar to people who are on SSI and SSDI in terms of how they rate you and all of that. And it's BS. We need to eliminate all of that, to be perfectly honest. But that's where my thoughts are. I would love to talk. I would love for us to plan another episode so we can actually launch this. But can we put a button on this right now and maybe like promote all of ourselves?
Absolutely. Because we've been doing this for almost 2 hours now.
It's crazy how quickly this goes. It's insane.
Yeah. And how much we haven't even talked about. Like, we haven't talked about
we got this far.
And we have to speak about it. We have to speak out. And so let's start our promotions for ourselves. I'm going to let Eric, you go first to promote your work, what you're doing, and how people can support you. I know you're doing some incredible things on your side, not only to support yourself, but also to support those around you and the other creators. And I would love for you to promote yourself as best you can. And everybody, from my heart, is go follow Eric. Go subscribe to his work.
So hi everybody. You can find me on Substack here at Dr. Eric Lulov. QR code's there. Thanks to Jason Gill for that wonderful caricature. He's been doing some great work with everybody online. He does some really amazing stuff with his artwork. So you can find me here. You can find my stuff on blueamp.co. Find us on the Diogenes Show on Thursdays at 12:30 with Nick, Walter, and Evan. You'll see my stuff. I'm posting constantly during the week. It's mostly on healthcare public policy. I do have a paywall, but that paywall, you can do a free subscription or you can pay $30 for the year. And what I do is I am building a fund that I use to help other creators, that I match every subscription. I don't keep any of the money. It's all escrowed. It goes into a subscription fund that I use to support other creators that I'm building through Blue Amp, that we're trying to build a creator fund to have a 2-year or 3-year creator type of program where you're mentored, you get help with publishing your articles, you help with your followers and your subscribers, and then eventually we graduate you from the program. It's still a program that we're working on. It's not instituted yet, but I will assure you that every subscription that comes in does not go to me personally, it goes into this fund, and I personally match every dollar that goes in. So if you have subscribed, thank you. If you're going to subscribe, thank you. If you haven't, just do a free follow. There's a new article that's out today that Ashley Lauren and I both co-wrote on Me Too Has Become Me Only. I highly suggest you read that. The other stuff that I publish is out there on healthcare policy, and you can find everything on to my Substack. But thank you, both of you, for having me on today. This is always fun to be. Nick, you and I always have a good time when we're on. Nieta, you're a doll. I love you. Thank you so much for your support, and thanks so much for doing all the hard work in this area, because it's so important. It's always an aspect of healthcare that people just kind of brush aside, and I just thanks for including me so that we could bring more attention to it.
Thanks for being with us. Naida, how about you, my friend?
So I am the CEO and founder of Disability Community for Democracy. We have a publication called...
Sorry, that was my fault. I hit the wrong button on my computer. Sorry, y'all. And no more for you, Naida. Sorry,
I love it.
sorry.
We were going-
Everyone. I was
we were
trying to hit
going
the
an hour and
mute
40
button
minutes.
and I hit the wrong one.
But yeah, I realized that I was muted. I was like, I think I'm muted.
I was like, what? You stopped talking. I was like, what did I just do? How did I do this? I'm so sorry, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have established
So-
technical difficulty. We'll be with you in a
I will say, I needed the laugh, just to put it out there. I needed the laugh. So I am the CEO and founder of Disability Community for Democracy. We are 100% run by volunteers. I don't get paid to do this. I have to look for paid work to do this. So all the subscriptions that you provide, all the paid subscribers, all of that stuff goes to the administrative cost of running Disability Community for Democracy. Like our monthly, we also have a back end for our restreams and emails and stuff like that, and website. Like I had to incorporate the work I'm doing to protect myself and others legally. That's why we are incorporated. We are not just doing this fly by night kind of sort of thing because of the current occupant. That's why we are incorporated. Also, when you go visit Nothing About Us Without Us, you can find out how to get involved with Disability Community for Democracy. So we have 2 regional coordinator positions that are open currently that we really need to get filled on the legal and policy side. You just have to have a disability. And if you have any questions, you can actually direct message me afterwards and I can answer questions about it and connect you to the person who oversees that part of the organization. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to talk about, can I talk about why we decided to do our show? Because I think it's important. So I did a conversation with Nick about the disabling effects of war. That's a free live stream on my page on Disability Community for Democracy's Substack. Nothing About Us Without Us. You can also watch it on Nick's publication as well. And we talked about the disabling effects of war. And I realized during that conversation, we need to go back to what we used to do in the 70s. We need to actually join together and work together as one community instead of what has happened now, where there are disabled veteran groups and non-disabled veteran groups. All of them are the legacy groups, and they're not really doing anything. They're not building bridges. And I'm like, we got to build bridges. And I'm also a family member of multiple vets, as I've talked about. And so I'm not just talking about this as somebody who has an affinity to veterans, even though I didn't serve and I don't have anybody in my family who served. I actually love our military. I love our country because I was taught that. I was raised with those values because my grandfather, my father, my 3 uncles, and my brother are all veterans. My brother and one of my uncles and my grandfather are all combat veterans. So I just want to say why this is important for Nick and I to work together, because it's personal to both of us. Go ahead, Nick. I'm done.
No, thanks so much, Naida. And building off of that is the Sick of the Ship publications is the work that I do. And just like Naida's, mine is also incorporated. I'm an LLC on my side. I do that for a reason so that I can protect myself and my community. Eric's got the Just Suck Less water bottle up there, which is on my merch store. If anybody wants to buy it, we also have some incredible Lift Other lines and things like that. But please come support the Sick of the Ship publications. I finally found my voice over this past year, and I have found who I know I am and what I want to talk about, and that is the Better Humaning Project and the work that we can do to better ourselves, to better our system and our society. And like Naida said, is build those bridges and bridge those gaps, because I'm a huge fan of the law called Conway's Law, which is that systems are designed in the way that their communication structure is built. And everything that we need right now is communication, and is getting together and organizing and building the plan, because we need something to plan for. We need something to hope for. We can't just be against eugenics. We're all against eugenics here. We can't just be against racism. We can't just be against homophobia and trans hate. And I'm going to take that last one. Homophobia is not a real thing. You're not afraid of gay people. You're just an asshole. We can't be afraid. We can't make fake fears. We have to join together and work together as a single force. And so I'm using this, and that's just like Naida said, is we're doing this show, Listen Louder, and learning more so we can hear, so we can be the change that we have all been asking for, and give actionable direction and actionable support for all of us to engage in and fall behind and work together with, arm in arm, hand in hand, not as disparate communities, but as one unified force. And Naida, you've been so amazing in support for all the work that I've been doing. I cannot thank you enough for your friendship that we have been building over these past few months. It has been so wonderful to get to know you. Eric, that's, you know, the same. I have told you so many times, I appreciate your friendship and support. And that's what this community has brought together, is friendship and support for all of us, and a system that we can come back to.
And I'm going to just say this. I have white friends and who are more conservative, and I generally trust them more because I know at least where they stand. The fact that I'm friends with the two of you and we agree on a lot, but we also disagree on stuff, and we can do that with humanity and understand that we are all on the same page, that humanity is not up for debate, has really opened my eyes that this is really about a humanity versus non-humanity, or right versus wrong, instead of all the battles that we've had over the years. Since Eric and I are both Gen Xers. I'm younger than Eric, though. I'm close.
Hey.
I am younger.
I'm not that old.
I am younger.
I'm not that old. I'm older.
I'm the millennial. I'm the baby in the group.
He's a millennial, but I'm closer to the elder millennial, though.
I'm going to do my Eddie Murphy. Hey.
So I do want to say, like, I actually have. If I cannot wait until we eventually all meet in real life. I do think we are going to meet in real life. We are going to have to do this work in real life. The goal, at least what Disability Community for Democracy wants to do, is we want to get this literally written, codified, all this written into law. And the only way we can do that effectively is go to DC and lobby and protest. Civil disobedience. I can't get arrested because I have family members in law enforcement. That's not going to be a good look for me or them. They will get suspended. So I cannot do that, but I can do everything else. I can talk to members of Congress. You know, that's what we need to do. I can be civically engaged. And the last thing I will say, Listen Louder is going to do is talk about the importance of civic engagement but above and beyond just voting, because people think, oh, I vote and my vote doesn't matter. Your vote matters, because if your vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to take it away. If your humanity didn't matter, they would not be coming out with these regulations around opinions. So your voice matters. It's about to be the right. It's about, we are not the right voices. We are the right voices. We are the people, and it's the extremely wealthy, it's the billionaire and trillionaire class versus the millionaires and everybody else. Because that's the kind of family I come from. Like my family, I have family members that are in the millionaire class. They're not billionaires, but they're wealthy. You know, upper middle class. Wealthy people. Some of them, but they're not in that Epstein class, and they get looked down upon. So it's millionaires and down versus the few at the top.
You know, we're really messed up when millionaires are getting looked down on by billionaires.
They are, though.
It's
They
like,
are.
really,
That's
it's
the
bad.
thing.
Like, seriously.
Yeah.
You only have 3 million. We can't talk
I'm
to
a tax professional.
you.
I'm a
Really?
tax professional who works with high net worth clients. They do get looked down upon. I've had conversations with them.
How far have we fallen as a society to get to this point? Like, that's a whole nother conversation. We're trying to end the show.
No, you're fine, brother.
Longest closing of a show I've
half
ever
an
been
hour
involved
long
with.
closing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we got to all unify.
It's like the ending of the movie Clue. Just when you think it's over, it's not over. But anyway, I just want to say we are at a crossroads, civilly, politically, generationally, constitutionally. You know, they are only going to take our rights and our ability to live if we allow them to do it. And the one thing they can't stop is they can't stop the internet. They can't. They can't stop the freedom of speech. Apparently, you can get arrested for touching the reflecting pool, but as Norm Eisen said yesterday, show me the federal law that says where it's illegal to touch water in the United States.
Yeah, good luck with that. The thing I will say about that, we've never had a Gen X president. We were going to get closest with MVP. We call her that because she was born in 1964, but she's technically not Gen X.
Nope.
But we have never had a Gen X president. We have never had a millennial president, and Gen Z is too young. We've never had presidents or both of our generation.
Well, we have a millennial vice president, but he's a shit.
Yeah, I don't really count him because he sold his soul. But I'm talking about president specifically. I'm not talking.
We haven't had a leader in Congress who's Gen X.
No, if Hakeem Jeffries would be the first.
He's not a leader, though.
I know, but I'm just saying he's
just a guy with a suit, just like all of them. They're just people with suits that aren't ready to lead or not all of them. There are some who are ready to be
I
there.
try to disagree with you about Hakeem Jeffries because I'm from New York and I know the work he's done. He's between a rock and a hard place. I know a lot of people in the actual party who has explained to me that you get rid of him, you lose seniority. And you got to also think about that.
I think, that could be that'll be its own conversation, too. Definitely. Okay, friends, we're going to finally do this. We're going to finally end it for the day. Thank you all for being here.
Everybody.
Please smash the heart one last time if you're on Substack or any of the other platforms with us, Kick, Twitch, YouTube. Please hit the subscribe, hit the like button if you can, whatever there is for a button for you. Just suck less, listen louder, and learn more. And we
need that on a.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a good one.
And then you've got Space Nick to go. Just listen louder over here.
We'll be doing some updates, and
Nick's going to do some updates on merch. I'm going to actually wear my organization merch that says "Say No to Crip Crow." I got to order a few of those shirts for our live stream. So I'm going to say peace out, everyone. Have a good day.
And good luck to everybody tomorrow. Today, big news day today. It's the New York primaries today. So good luck to the candidates running. Hopefully we'll have some good news later this evening with whoever will be the nominee for 7, 13, and 20 in New York, in Manhattan. And hopefully the right people, the New Yorkers, will make their voices known, and we'll know
today what New York thinks.
We'll know today. So we'll know today what New York
thinks. If you are in New York, go vote. Go do your civic duty today. Use your voice when you can, and do not let them silence
you. If you don't vote, you can't bitch.
Exactly.
Let's change that word. I don't like that word. If you don't vote, you can't complain. You can't shit on it. You can't be mad if you don't use your voice, because silence is complicity. So everybody, thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Go listen louder and learn some more. Have a great one, y'all.
Be well, everybody.